Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If guy. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Issei becomes governor of Grigori. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. A young man with dark hair and blonde highlights remarked that someone was quite boring. Another young man, around 20 years old with dark blue hair and violet eyes, calmly responded that it was not his concern that Azazel was a drunken, lazy pervert who never did his job. Azazel pretended to be hurt by Issei's words, letting out a sigh. The young man's name was Himejima Issei, the firstborn of the Barakiel cadre. He had fallen in love with a human, marrying her and having 2 children, a son and a daughter. Issei, 2 years older than his sister, had revealed his wings and fallen power when his younger sister was born, showcasing his prodigious talent in magic, strength, and knowledge. Issei caught the attention of Azazel, the governor of Grigori, who personally trained him throughout his life. As the years passed, Issei gained greater power and knowledge through his rigorous training. Unfortunately, when Issei was 7, his mother fell into a coma after their clan, the Himejima, attacked while his father was away on a mission assigned by Azazel. Issei fought fiercely, taking down most of what was left of the now nearly extinct Himejima clan. He fought to protect his mother and sister until he was utterly exhausted, yet he continued to battle. However, a rogue managed to reach his mother, stabbing her in the stomach with a katana. Upon witnessing this, Issei erupted in rage. In that moment, something awakened within him, a power that many desired and feared. A red gauntlet with a green gem and 2 golden horns appeared on his left arm. This was the boosted gear, a Longinus-level sacred gear containing the soul and power of the Red Dragon Emperor, Draig, whose ability was to double the user's power every 10 seconds. Filled with fury, the young boy charged energy, and the last thing the man saw before falling was a red beam of energy, as crimson as blood, accompanied by the words, "Dragon Shot." Issei fell into despair as he saw his mother on the brink of death. He felt useless for not being able to protect her, overwhelmed by disappointment, disgust, and self-hatred for failing to keep her safe until his father returned home. In that moment of desperation, silver flames enveloped his left arm, which was still holding his mother's hand. The flames traveled to her, and although Issei was terrified, everything changed when he saw the flames healing her wound, stopping the bleeding. When his father arrived, Issei had a lost look in his eyes while his worried younger sister tried to rouse him. Filled with pain and anger, she shouted at their father that it was all his fault. She blamed him for their mother's condition and for Issei looking like a lifeless being. She expressed her hatred for her blood, her wings, and even for him. After running away from what remained of his home, Issei was unaware that he had been unconscious since defeating the last attacker. Only his desperation and sadness had kept him moving until the flames engulfed his mother and healed her. After that, his body could no longer withstand the strain, and he fell into a vegetative state. His father wept, both for his words and for witnessing the condition of his wife and son. He took both of them to a hospital in Grigori, then dedicated himself to searching for his daughter, but she was nowhere to be found. Days later, Surzek's Gregori contacted him, informing him that his daughter was safe but refused to return or see him, which filled him with sorrow. Time passed, and Issei regained consciousness. When he learned that his mother was in a coma, he felt relieved that she had not died, but guilt consumed him. He repeatedly told himself it was his fault, that he had been too weak. From that moment on, Issei devoted his life to training day and night, and in his free time, he waited in his mother's hospital room for her to wake up. He had been doing this for 13 years without fail, always there, hoping for her recovery. Many tried to encourage him, but he always responded that it was his fault, that his weakness had caused this, before returning to his training. At the age of 12, a glimmer of light entered his life thanks to a girl his age, with white hair and red eyes named Elizabeth. She was undoubtedly a beautiful girl, a pure fallen angel, daughter of the cadre Barakiel, and a lovely mid-class fallen angel named Beatrice. They trained together. She watched him train tirelessly and they talked about anything. When they turned 17, they began a romantic relationship, and a year later, they took the significant step of getting engaged. Both Barakiel and Zarahiel were very pleased with their engagement. At their wedding, Shimaza officiated the ceremony, with Azazel as Issei's godfather and Penemu as Elizabeth's. They had been married for 2 years, during which Elizabeth helped ease the guilt Issei felt about his mother's condition, and for those 2 years, Issei felt complete and happy. During the years Issei undertook missions for Grigori, he earned several titles: Dragon Emperor of the Sacred Flames, Marquis of Fire, Prince of the Sacred Flame, and his favorite, Overlord of the Crimson Purgatory. Drake cried tears of joy upon hearing that last title. Returning to the earlier scene, Azazel urged Issei to join him for drinks and some company, but Issei was determined to focus on his work. He explained that Penemu was still training him, as a certain lazy crow had chosen him as the new governor of Grigori. He was learning to do the job that Azazel had never completed. Issei knew that if Elizabeth found out he had abandoned his work to party with Azazel, she would be furious, and he valued his well-being too much to risk that. Azazel had already spoken to Tobio, who had given him the same response as Issei. He playfully remarked that Azazel was a free fallen angel, unbound by ties. Issei, feeling weary, excused himself to continue working. He mentioned that he had sensed the awakening of the Hakuryuku weeks prior, and when Azazel inquired if it bothered him, Issei replied that if it posed a threat, he would eliminate it, and that would be the end of it. Azazel reminded him that it was in Kuo, where Issei's sister was, and asked if he was concerned about her safety. Issei expressed his trust in Akeno, confident that she would inform him immediately if anything were to happen. Azazel, feeling playful, mentioned that he hoped Kokubile wouldn't cause too much suffering, but Issei's demeanor turned serious as he mentioned the ongoing battle between the Gremori and Citri heirs against Kokubile. Knew that neither stood a chance, even with the church's support. As he spoke, a whirlwind of flames consumed his disciple. Meanwhile, at Kuo Academy, Akeno was about to be struck by a lance of light aimed at her and her friend, Rias Gremori. When the lance reached Akeno, it exploded, creating a thick cloud of smoke. Once it cleared, Akeno appeared severely injured, while Rias was furious. Rias accused Akeno of dishonoring her lineage by siding with demons, expressing her disdain with a sadistic smile. Akeno, furious and being healed by Asia Argento, the bishop of the Gremori family, vehemently defended her brother and refused to be compared to anyone else. As the battle intensified, Rias unleashed a powerful attack, reinforced by Akeno, who had recovered from her injuries. They both shouted their attack as it surged toward Kokubile, who merely smirked and deflected it with ease. As the situation escalated, a blonde with gray eyes and a blue-haired girl with a green streak, wielding a large blue sword, intervened, blocking the attack and causing an explosion. Tired of playing games, the blonde declared the start of a war, preparing a massive lance for the impending conflict. A light larger than Kuo Academy enveloped the area. Time seemed to stand still for Rias and Akeno, both sharing the same thought. "I'm sorry, brother." Suddenly, a presence that terrified everyone except Akeno, who recognized it well, began to cry with relief and happiness. This presence was filled with rage and concern, causing Kokubile to tremble in fear. The barrier surrounding Kuo Academy shattered, revealing a young man who appeared to be in his 20s. He had 6 pairs of fallen wings as black as the abyss, long dark blue hair, and violet eyes that glinted with a terrifying fury, directed specifically at Kokubile. Kokubile stammered, questioning the young man's arrival, wondering if he had come for the target. Terror filled his voice as he screamed in pain when one of his wings was scorched by a silver flame. Issei spoke with a rough tone that sent chills through those present, warning against underestimating him. The blue-haired warrior turned to look at his sister, who bore several injuries from the last attack. With one hand, he crushed the enormous lance of light, shattering it into countless pieces as if it were made of glass. The silver-haired observer marveled at the display of strength. Kokubile, the angel of the stars, faced Himejima Issei, the overlord of the Crimson Purgatory and the next governor of Grigori. Issei declared Kokubile's death sentence for the severity of his crimes against Grigori and the fragile peace that existed. He seized Kokubile by the head, lifting him higher into the starry sky, and continued to speak. His execution would be public, a warning to anyone who might consider betrayal or rebellion against them. Issei addressed the people of Grigori through a magical circle that opened before him. He hoped they were enjoying their night as the scene unfolded live in every home, bar, establishment, and office across Grigori. He introduced himself, stating that many knew him, while others had only heard of him. He warned anyone contemplating treachery, not just against him but against their entire race, that they would meet the same fate as the former cadre and now criminal of Grigori, Kokabil. He expressed his apologies in advance to any children watching, urging them to cover their eyes and ears. With great force, Issei gripped Kokabil's right arm, who attempted to create a lance of light, only to have his arm shattered and torn from his torso. A scream filled with pain echoed across City and much of Grigori. Issei seized Kokabil by the leg and slowly incinerated his torso until a gaping hole revealed his organs. Issei then asked if Kokabil had anything to say. Kokabil, in a weakened voice, muttered a curse and requested to be greeted by an elder. In a swift motion, Issei separated Kokabil's head from his neck, taking a piece of his spine with it. Everyone was terrified, except for the fallen angels, who sighed with disgust, and Akeno, who blushed deeply while smiling with a hint of esteem. Unnoticed by others, Issei wore a similar expression, albeit more concealed. He relished torturing his enemies, especially when they begged for mercy, and although his wife denied it, she secretly enjoyed witnessing this darker side of him. After executing Kokabil and ending the transmission, Issei incinerated the remains and approached the young demons, who were on high alert. They were taken aback when Akeno ran to him, embracing him and crying on his chest. "This is going to be interesting," Azazel remarked, observing from a building some distance from Kuo Academy. Akeno, curious, asked a red-haired girl who approached the blue-haired siblings about Issei's identity. The blue-haired girl stepped away from her brother to answer. Before she could respond, other members of the ORC and the student council gathered to voice their concerns, as the mere presence of Issei instilled fear and caused Valley a tremendous pain in his back. "Why does it hurt so much?" Valley mentally questioned his sealed dragon. The dragon simply replied that he was in trouble before cutting off their mental link. "Let me introduce him. This is Himejima Issei, my older brother," Akeno said, wiping her tears. "Wait, you had a brother?" everyone exclaimed, except for Sona, the heir of the Citri clan, and her queen, Tsubaki Shinra, who scrutinized Issei with their gazes. "Why didn't you mention it?" Rias asked, somewhat annoyed that her queen had kept such important information hidden. "Did you ever ask?" Akeno replied, tapping her head, causing the others to exchange blank stares. "Speaking of sharing, Akeno, I told you to call me if you needed anything," Issei said, his tone a mix of reprimand and mild annoyance. Akeno lowered her gaze and timidly responded, "I didn't want to bother you. You have so much work as governor, and I didn't want to delay you." "I'm sorry." Issei sighed but then smiled warmly. "You know I would leave a war if you needed me. After all, you are my little sister," he said, giving her a gentle pat on the head. "Sorry to interrupt this tender moment, Himejima-sama, but I wanted to know what you are doing here," Sona interjected, prompting Issei to turn his attention to her. "You must be the Citri heir." "To answer your question, I came to ensure my sister is safe," he said, looking at her seriously, causing her to feel a bit shy. They talked for a while, with Akeno and Issei conversing somewhat apart. It was clear that Issei was discussing something serious, which seemed to sadden Akeno. When Issei finished speaking, Akeno returned to the group. Guys, I have something very important to tell you," she said, looking downcast. "What is it, Akeno-san?" Yudo Kiba, the wielder of the sword birth, asked. "I'm leaving for Grigori tomorrow," she announced, leaving everyone, especially the red-haired girl, in shock. "That can't be. You're leaving, Akeno?" Ria spoke with a trembling voice, expressing her feelings of inadequacy. Her brother believed it was for the best. She couldn't keep herself safe, and the Hakuryuku was an unreliable ally. He insisted that she would go to Grigori with him, train, and not return to the human world until she proved she could take care of herself. Tears streamed down her face as she admitted her weakness. She was about to argue when two magical circles appeared. One was navy blue, bearing the crest of the fallen angels, from which emerged 8 fallen angels, each with 3 pairs of wings, along with a woman with white hair and red eyes. The other circle, marked with the crest of Lucifer, revealed a red-haired man and a silver-haired maid, accompanied by a battalion of 8 demons from House Grigori. The red-haired man expressed gratitude for the situation being under control. He acknowledged that it was his duty, as one of his own had caused serious trouble and was punished for it. He hoped this wouldn't disrupt their fragile peace. Both men locked eyes for several minutes, creating tension among the demons and fallen angels. Issei broke the silence, instructing Akeno to say her goodbyes. Akeno smiled sadly, raising a hand to the others as she walked toward her brother. Vale, frustrated by his inability to confront Kokubile and feeling insulted, lunged at Issei, activating his dividing power. Just as he was about to strike, Akeno intervened, unleashing a powerful shock that stopped him. She expressed her determination to protect her brother, deeming it ridiculous for a low-class demon to lay a finger on him, her eyes filled with regret as she looked at Vale. Issei regarded Vale dismissively before walking toward Surzex. They moved away from the others for a moment before returning. Surzex approached Akeno with a calm smile, thanking her for looking after Rias. He then relieved her of her duties as the queen of the current heir of House Grigori, granting her freedom under the care of the fallen angels and specifically under Issei's protection. A green circle with the Grigori crest appeared beneath Akeno, and a vibrant red queen emerged from her. The members of the ORC and the student council were stunned. How could Lucifer do this? Among them, Rias was the most affected, shocked by the loss of her queen and best friend, devastated by the thought of Akeno leaving, and furious with her brother for allowing it. Still in shock, she watched as a blue-haired exorcist with a green streak approached her brother, kneeling before him and seeking asylum in the fallen faction. When he inquired about her reasoning, she declared that God was dead, and she no longer had a reason to follow the church's orders. She asked for his mercy and acceptance into the fallen faction. He consulted with his white-haired companion, who agreed. Zenobia Quarta, as the exorcist was named, retrieved her Durandal and the fragment of Excalibur Destruction, one of the 7 fragments of Excalibur, and joined the young man, alongside Akeno and her escort. By the time Rias regained her composure, they had already departed through a magical circle toward Grigori, the headquarters of the fallen angels. Rias called out to her brother, questioning what he had done and why. Surzex silenced her, instructing his guards to take the day off. He expressed his need for a drink and suggested they head to the club. When they finally arrived at the occult club, still reeling from the events, everyone settled into the couches while Surzex took Rias's usual seat. He asked Sona for a report on what had transpired. She complied, and he remarked on how he was no longer as young as he used to be, which elicited incredulous looks from everyone. Noticing their reactions, he jokingly clarified that he was around 517 years old and considered himself a war veteran. Setting aside his age, Rias pressed him for the reason he had handed Akeno over to the fallen faction. He explained it was a simple favor, requested by Himejima as a brotherly gesture. He understood that, as the older brother, Akeno was his responsibility, just as he would do anything for his sister. Curious, Rias inquired what Himejima owed him for this favor. Surzex replied simply, stating it was just a signature. The maid beside her inquired about the situation. It was confirmed that a signature was needed for a peace treaty among the 3 major factions. The others understood, except for Rias, who stood up and left the club. The red-haired one announced his departure, instructing them to inform Rias that he awaited her report. With that, he activated a magic circle and returned to the underworld. A little over a week had passed, a week during which Rias remained inside the occult club at school and refused to leave her room at home. Her noble family was quite worried about her, especially Vale, who had feelings for her. Kiba, Rias's knight, explained that his master was quite particular when it came to choosing a partner and that he did not meet Rias's standards, which he completely ignored. On the other hand, Akeno underwent rigorous training, with her brother as her trainer. There were times when she wished to return to the human world with her best friend, but she couldn't deny that she enjoyed this environment. Being with her brother and sister-in-law made her feel happier than she had in a long time. She felt complete, although she wished her mother could be there. Finally feeling at peace in a place she could call home was something unique. She had to admit that her strength had significantly increased compared to her previous power. Of course, she couldn't even scratch her brother, but that was justified. He was an incredibly powerful being. Her sister-in-law was very good at understanding her feelings, helping her come to terms with that fateful day for her family. Although she wouldn't apologize to her father just yet, she felt she could start anew. Perhaps coming to Grigori was something she should have done a long time ago. Setting that aside, she was now enjoying a meal prepared by her sister-in-law with her family of 3. Issei caught Akeno's attention. He addressed her, asking if she had received information from her school. They requested her presence in 2 days and wanted to know the urgency behind it. Akeno thought for a moment, then recalled that there would be an event called Open House in 2 days. They likely wanted her to attend with her legal guardian, who was Issei in this case. She smiled at the thought. Issei pondered for a moment before looking at her and then at his wife, who nodded in agreement. He decided they would go, but he reminded Akeno that they would only attend the event and then return home. She responded with a cheerful acknowledgement. 2 days later, Issei reminded Akeno that this would only be a one-time visit to the human world, so she should make the most of it. He noted that while her brother might be swayed by his charms and allow some flexibility, he wouldn't permit her to return until she could give him a good fight. Akeno nodded in understanding, preparing herself for the day ahead. Issei asked from the doorway of the room where they were, feeling a sense of anticipation from both of them. He instructed them to get into the limousine and then stepped away. Once they boarded, a magical transport circle formed beneath the limousine, sending them to the outskirts of Kuo City. The driver, a fallen angel, drove them to the school entrance, where they immediately became the center of attention. When Akeno exited the limousine, many young girls lit up at the sight of their beloved Wanisama returning, while several young men cast admiring glances in her direction. Next, the pale-haired girl stepped out, drawing dreamy looks from the boys and a hint of envy from the girls. Finally, Issei emerged, causing a stir among the crowd. Several women, both mothers and daughters, experienced a nosebleed, while the men who had been watching Akeno or the pale-haired girl froze in place at the sight of Issei's icy gaze. The seriousness of his expression added an imposing aura around him, making some begin to tremble. Issei took his wife by the hand and placed an arm around Akeno, who smiled as she led them to her classroom. There, they were greeted by Sona Citri, the queen, along with some human classmates. Time passed as Issei and his wife chatted comfortably with the human parents. Issei thought about how delighted his mother would be to see this moment, so he summoned a high-definition video recorder to capture the day for her. After a few minutes of recording Akeno chatting with her friends, he felt a sense of satisfaction watching her blush with embarrassment. Just then, a red-haired girl arrived, accompanied by 2 other red-haired individuals. Gregori had been having a tough day. Without her best friend, there wasn't much to talk about or any reason to attend school. Her brother thought it was silly that she was so upset over something like that, which affected her deeply. He believed it was foolish for her to feel so down without Akeno, suggesting that if Akeno wanted to return to being her queen after her brother let her go, she could easily welcome her back into her noble circle. However, if Akeno didn't want to return, Rias would have to learn to live with that and respect her best friend's decisions. This thought terrified Rias. She feared that her best friend might not want to be her queen again. Upon arriving at the school and seeing the limousine outside, she felt a flicker of hope, especially when she noticed the car ornament, which bore the crest of the fallen angels with 2 wings crafted from black gold. She hoped her friend was inside, longing for Akeno to return to her side. But reality quickly set in when she saw Akeno's radiant smile as she passed by without acknowledging her. Classes began, and after the teacher explained the special class activities, the students eagerly got to work. The assignment involved creating a small drawing of their favorite place in the world. Many chose to depict beaches, game centers, public pools, or their grandparents' houses. Akeno, however, knew exactly what to draw. She illustrated a small Japanese-style house from the Meiji era, painted in white and red, surrounded by a garden filled with white roses. On the porch, she depicted herself at 5 years old, sitting beside her 7-year-old brother and their mother, who was calmly brushing her hair while her brothers sipped tea prepared by their mother. Issei remarked that Akeno had grown a bit since he brought her home. He acknowledged that she had indeed matured but wasn't ready to return to the human world permanently. There was still much for her to learn. He admitted to himself that he enjoyed having his family close and hoped that it might soon come true. Shimazai had mentioned that their mother's brainwaves were increasing, suggesting that she might awaken in a few months or weeks. Issei smiled, and this was not a hollow smile. It radiated genuine happiness. Really? Alvina expressed her eagerness to meet her future mother-in-law, which brought a light chuckle from the blue-haired boy. After the activity concluded, the parents and guardians approached to admire the portraits created by the students. Issei felt a wave of nostalgia wash over him as he gazed at the portrait of his sister. He vividly remembered that day when their parents took them to a fair. They enjoyed various rides, indulged in delicious food, and had a great time. Akeno had a bit of an upset stomach the next day, but the most special moment was when the family of 4 sat on a hill away from the fair, watching the fireworks in peaceful silence. A tear rolled down Issei's cheek as he kissed his sister's forehead, causing her to blush with embarrassment. The other mothers smiled at the sweet interaction. Meanwhile, Alvina was lost in her own thoughts, imagining a little girl with dark blue hair and red eyes playing with her father's hair while they both laughed, and she watched from the kitchen as she prepared dinner. Rias observed the scene with a deep frown, her intense gaze fixed on the blue-haired boy. The pair of red-haired individuals watched Rias with concern. The older redhead, Zeudicus, felt worried about his daughter and the direction her actions might take. While he understood her frustration, he also recognized the protective nature of Akeno's older brother. He could see the deep affection they had for each other, but he was anxious that Rias might do something that could spark a conflict between the demon faction and the fallen angels. If that happened, the Gregori clan would be tarnished forever, remembered as the clan that ignited the Third Holy War out of a child's whim. This would lead to a loss of their noble status and cause their allies to sever ties, plunging their economy into chaos. Seeing that his sister was on the verge of exploding with anger, Surzex decided it was best to take her away, so he sought the magical signature of Vale and brought them along, with a very upset Rias in tow. Akeno, who had been absorbed in the unfolding situation, was more concerned about her brother and sister-in-law's constant teasing than Rias's presence. She now understood Rias's feelings. It was strange not to feel the usual happiness, but perhaps Rias was with her family, as that was the purpose of the day. After the teacher praised her in front of her brother, making him swell with pride, Akeno decided it was time to head home. Although she felt a bit down about not seeing Rias, she understood that both of them had families and wanted to spend time with them. Not everything revolved around friends. Akeno gently suggested it was time to leave, and her older sister agreed. Before they departed, Akeno hesitated, asking if she could visit her former clubmates. Her husband, seeing the longing in his little sister's eyes, agreed but set a time limit of 10 minutes. The school was closing soon anyway, so it didn't make much difference. She approached her former classmates, chatting for a while with Asia, Kaneko, and Kiba. Meanwhile, Vale was having a somewhat bitter experience as his parents conversed with Rias's family about who knows what, while he tried to strike up a conversation with his captain, who was not paying him any attention. He was worried about her, having heard from his classmates that Akeno had finally brought her family. In reality, they were captivated by Akeno's older brother, with some younger girls even calling him an angel, which wasn't too far from the truth. Eventually, Valis searched for Akeno until he heard the limousine's engine start. He ran in that direction, only to see it pull away. As it turned a corner, a flash of blue light appeared on the street, indicating that Akeno had been transported by a magic circle. He returned to his parents, disappointed that he hadn't seen the violet-eyed girl. At least his beloved captain would be going home with him and their club friends. During dinner prepared by his mother, Rias's father and brother embarrassed her to the point of turning her hair red. She dashed up the stairs to the second floor, where Vala followed her. He spoke with her, realizing how hurt she felt by Akeno's neglect and her preference for that other boy over her. Despite not having siblings, Vala didn't think it was strange or wrong for Akeno to focus on her family. If he had an older brother, he would try to impress him at all costs. Although he was initially furious with that boy, he soon understood that the measures taken by Akeno's brother were meant to keep her safe. After all, that's what older brothers do. He could relate to this feeling, as he always considered Asia like a little sister and would do anything to protect her. After Akeno expressed her feelings, her brother joined them to ask for a favor, to provide protection for the meeting of the three major factions. They agreed but also mentioned that they would present a report on what had transpired. They were informed of the attendees: Seraphal Leviathan, Sona Citri's older sister, Rias's own brother, from the angels, Michael, the Overlord of Heaven, and the Queen of Hearts, Gabriel, along with the Ace of Spades from Michael, and finally, from the Crows, Himejima Issei, the current governor of Grigori, his advisor and former governor, Azazel, along with a personal guard. Rias hoped that Akeno would be chosen for that role, though she doubted it. And Vale. Azazel found himself feeling quite bored as he stretched in his chair. A young girl with blue hair and a green streak, who displayed her 4 raven wings and leaned on a large blue sword, scolded him for his behavior. She reminded him that he should not act that way. Azazel playfully retorted, questioning her age and suggesting she shouldn't mimic her father. Another figure, a dark-haired crow, chimed in, urging Azazel to stop complaining. The girl, a skilled swordswoman, inquired about the whereabouts of the demons and angels. Azazel reassured her that he could sense Lucifer and Leviathan nearby, while Michael was likely busy with paperwork, a common task for the Overlord of Heaven. He explained that, unlike the angels, the fallen were not a religion and did not offer prayers in exchange for favors. They were more like entrepreneurs, with many being warriors or brilliant scientists. Azazel, despite his lazy demeanor, was one of them. The girl diligently took notes in her notebook titled, Dad's Notes and Advice. Azazel quietly pondered whether to feel offended or flattered by the conversation. Just then, the door swung open, revealing a red-haired girl with a hopeful smile that quickly faded. Surzex entered behind her, followed by Seraphal and their respective entourages, except for Kaneko, who remained with the ORC. Surzex wore a calm smile as he curiously regarded the blue-haired girl, while Seraphal observed Issei with a serious expression. Surzex apologized for the delay, and Azazel remarked that it was about time they arrived. Issei, addressing Surzex, expressed his hope that the rudeness of his advisor, Lucifer, would not affect their future treaty. Azazel sank deeper into his chair, trying to avoid the tension. Seraphal noted that they were only waiting for Michael to arrive. Almost immediately, a flash of light appeared, and from it emerged a blonde with green eyes, a brown-haired girl with violet eyes, and a blonde with blue eyes. They looked apprehensively at Zenobia, who magnificently ignored them. Michael introduced himself as the leader of the Heavenly Faction and introduced his companions, Griselda Corda and Irina Shidu. Issei, with a lighter tone, suggested they begin as his wife would be upset if he arrived late for dinner. This comment caused several to sweat nervously, except for Surzex, who discreetly checked his watch and paled slightly. Issei took a serious tone, offering apologies to both Heaven and Hell for Kokobil's actions during the government transition, which allowed him to move freely without scrutiny. He shared that Kokobil had been publicly executed as a warning to those who might consider turning against him. Surzex acknowledged the necessity of such measures to control future renegades, commending Issei's decision. Michael expressed his dislike for violence but agreed it was the best course of action. Seraphal then redirected the conversation to the main reason for their gathering. Azazel explained that Kokobil had a deep addiction to the thrill of battle and believed that war was the only way to feel alive again. They suspected he was involved with a certain organization. Griselda inquired about this organization. Issei revealed that his vice-governor, Shimazai, believed several rebels from various factions were uniting under a group known as the Cow's Brigade, with unclear objectives. He also suspected that the leader of this organization was the Infinite Dragon, Ouroboros Ophis, which created a tense atmosphere. Vala questioned the mention of Ophis, and Zenobia elaborated that he was the Infinite Dragon, one of the most powerful beings in existence, surpassed only by DXD. Asia's inquiry about whether Ophis was a god elicited grimaces from several attendees. Zenobia confirmed that he was indeed a dragon god, ranking among the top 3 most powerful beings, alongside DXD and Triexa, and expressed her confidence that one day, Issei would surpass them all. The mention of father caught Issei's attention, leaving him with a mix of emotions as the conversation continued. Griselda spoke with clear doubt in her voice, noting that the girl had no parents. She had taken her from the orphanage. She had her surname but was not her daughter, nor had she even married. Zenobia introduced herself as Himejima Zenobia, the adopted daughter of Himejima Issei, leaving everyone pleasantly surprised. Surzex acknowledged the news, stating that it was certainly a good thing, but they should begin discussing the terms of the treaty. For about an hour and a half, they covered important topics, adjusting some and adding others. After much deliberation, Issei, Michael, and Surzex signed the agreement alongside Serafal, Azazel, and Griselda as advisors, with Zenobia, Irina, and Sona as witnesses. Just as the formalities concluded, the sky turned red, and the Citri entourage froze in place. Zenovia's Durandal appeared in her right hand, while Irina's sword glowed with a golden hue. Kiba's sacred gear, the balance breaker, was forced into its mode, the sword of betrayal, a sacred demonic sword. Michael questioned whether time had stopped, to which Griselda confirmed with a look of confusion. Azazel commented that it seemed to be the ability of a half-vampire as he moved to the window to see their troops being withdrawn through magical circles. Zenobia, feeling a sense of panic, remarked that they were isolated and sensed some interference with the communicator to the office. Issei reassured her, promising to give his life to ensure her safety and urging her to stay close to him as he embraced her tightly. Serafal wondered who could have done this, while Azazel noted that it had to be someone powerful, as not just anyone could hold them back, beings of great power like themselves. Irina mentioned that their sacred swords protected them, observing as Zenobia stopped trembling and grasped Durandal firmly. Griselda remarked that the sacred demonic sword had saved Kiba, who was on guard for a potential attack. Issei explained that Vale must have been protected by the target. Azazel then asked who wanted to go rescue the Damfer from control. Rias, who had been resting her hand on Vale's shoulder before time froze, raised her hand with conviction, stating that she would go since he was her servant. Surzex seriously instructed Vale to go and provide support, to which he agreed. As Rias and Vale were sent off, several magical circles transported wizards clad in black robes. Michael questioned whether Mephisto was among them, but Azazel clarified that the composition of the formulas was different. They were from another realm. Issei, drawing attention to the situation, declared that he would deal with some wizards and instructed Zenobia to handle Vale, warning her to cut him in half if he did anything out of line. He then spread his 12 wings and flew through a hole he created in the ceiling, leaving everyone stunned. Zenobia raised Durandal and pointed it at Azazel, who appeared nervous. Michael wondered if she truly intended to act. Azazel, raising a finger with a grin, began to describe Issei, stating that he was the son of Barakiel and a human, with an extreme affinity for fire. He explained that the blood of the fallen acted as a catalyst to create the sacred flame, causing Michael and Griselda to widen their eyes in surprise. Azazel added that even he had not seen all of Issei's power and mentioned that Issei was married and favored dark blue, shrugging as he noticed the tension in the room. Issei began to engage the wizards, attacking them with powerful blows. Suddenly he soared into the air, creating several light spears and hurling them at the enemies. Moments later he sensed 2 presences fighting, one of which was overloading. A loud explosion followed, and the magical circle in the sky, which had been supplying wizards almost infinitely, vanished. Issei casually asked where Vale's arm was, causing everyone to sweat. Vale nonchalantly replied that he had cut it off. Issei simply nodded, stating that with the wizards gone and Kateria dead, they only needed to discuss the final details. Vale, with the wings of the dividing appearing on his back, remarked that Issei's bearer was interesting. The gauntlet of the boosted gear materialized on Issei's left arm, surprising everyone. Vale acknowledged that this time, Issei was in serious trouble. He then launched himself to attack Issei but soon found himself with a painful diagonal cut across his chest and torso. Zenobia coldly instructed Rias to control her reckless pawn. Rias frowned but nodded in agreement. She then called for Asia to heal Valle, while Valle prepared for the next move. Rias could barely contain her anger. Her foolish pawn had nearly started a war, and although she didn't particularly like the person involved, her father had warned her not to take any action against him, or the consequences would be severe. The proud and serious voice of Draig echoed in the room, stating that Rias's pawn was no match for his partner. If he attempted to attack in his current state, he would be crushed like an insect. It was evident to everyone present that Issei was, and would remain, the strongest Sekyurii in history. Centuries of training to reach his level of power, but with enough dedication, they might be able to put up a decent fight. With that, the meeting concluded, but not before Michael gifted Issei the Dragon Slayer sword, Ascalon, as a gesture of peace and non-aggression. Valle seethed with anger and envy. His rival had taken Akeno-senpai, who was praised and adored, and was strong and happily married. Despite his own good looks, he couldn't attract anyone's attention. As Issei, Azazel, and Zenobia departed before Valle could explode, he was about to leave when he noticed Rias standing before him with a cold expression. In the next moment he found himself on the floor with a red mark on his cheek. Rias confronted him, questioning what he thought he was doing. Valle attempted to respond but was interrupted. Rias pointed out that his actions could have sparked a war. Of course, he didn't realize that he was foolish. Valle froze. In the 2 months since his reincarnation, she had never spoken to him like that. She had always referred to him affectionately, but it seemed he had crossed a line. Rias declared that his punishment would be to reopen his wound, leaving him in pain for a week without assistance. As she walked past him, Asia, with a pained expression, reopened the wound, flooding him with agony. "I'm sorry, Valakun, but this time you went too far, and Bucho is not in the best mood," Kiba remarked as he passed by, with Asia on the verge of tears. Kaneko literally stepped over him, calling him an idiot. Valle lay there while the leaders observed him. Serafal commented that the boy didn't seem very bright. Surzek sighed, expressing regret and stating he would have to speak with his sister. Michael and Gabriel bid farewell, leaving Valle alone on the ground. Feeling exhausted, Valle eventually succumbed to sleep, lying there in silence. After that meeting, Issei and his companions returned to Grigori, along with his newly acquainted daughter, Zenobia. During the meeting, he had to explain what it meant to be a fallen angel, especially since she was entirely human when she was in the church. He clarified that after Zenobia requested asylum in his faction, he offered her a place to stay in his home. His wife had approved the offer, so there was no issue with her acceptance. Zenobia proved to be a great help to Akeno in overcoming her issues with her father. Although she didn't have a father herself, she had a small complex about it. She had always enjoyed helping others when she was part of the church, and even though she no longer needed to fight or become stronger, she wouldn't sit idly by. As the days passed, Zenobia approached Issei in a way she had never done with anyone before. He always responded patiently to her questions and requests, no matter how trivial they seemed. One day, in a moment of trust, she accidentally referred to him as Dad. This surprised Issei and embarrassed Zenobia, but he didn't mind. Despite her innocence in some matters and her lack of common sense, he had grown fond of her. She reminded him of his younger self before the incident with his mother, when he had been just as innocent and lacking in common sense. One evening during dinner, he made a proposal to his wife, who gladly accepted. The next day, Zenobia received what she had always wanted for 17 years: a family, a father, a mother, an aunt, though the sadistic nature of one was a bonus, a grandfather who took the time to teach her what the church had overlooked, and finally, a grandmother. Although she couldn't speak with her, Issei always spoke wonderfully about her. At last, after so long, she was happy. Zenobia wanted to share a bond much stronger than what they currently had. She wished to share their blood, to forget her time in the church, and to believe that they were her biological parents. She wanted to proudly claim that she possessed the blood of the governor of Grigori and his wife, who had shown her kindness. It is said that humans have an incredible capacity for adaptation, and Zenobia demonstrated this by somehow changing. She adapted to her surroundings, and the desire in her heart became the catalyst for her to absorb Issei's power and essence, altering her aura and transforming her into a fallen angel. Azazel and Serahiel continued to investigate the cause of this anomaly. If it could happen again, they could recruit more fallen angels and increase their numbers. With luck, they might discover a way to reincarnate humans in a few years. Zenobia divided her time among various activities. She studied with her paternal and maternal grandfathers when they were available, exercised, and trained with her aunt Akeno, who taught her the basics to improve her endurance. According to her grandfather, Barakiel, what she lacked was stamina. Her favorite activities included spending time with her mother, learning to cook and manage household tasks, and then going to her father to learn about the world's politics. Sometimes, they simply talked for hours while he worked or watched a raiding game between demons to pass the time. With her father, she sharpened her mind, and with her mother, she softened her heart. As the weeks passed, Zenobia began to resemble Issei in attitude but retained her mother's character. She stopped dyeing her green streak and opted for white instead. She let her hair grow a little, maintaining the same cut that she believed defined her. She had spoken with Irina for hours through magic circles, both happy for each other. Irina understood Zenovia's longing for a family, and in her opinion, the current governor was a wonderful man, as he had given Zenobia what she had never known, the love of a family. She respected him because, over time, she noticed how well he treated her friend, surrounding her with warmth and care. From the moment she had contacted Zenobia, she had seen that special glow in her friend, a glow of happiness, maturity, tranquility, and serenity, combined with a considerable seriousness and quality. After meeting her friend's mother one day when she was invited over, she noticed that the woman with white hair was very warm, while Issei was serious and calm. They were a good combination and a positive influence on the blue-haired girl. One day, while they were all having dinner together, Issei, his wife, Akeno, his two grandfathers, Barakiel and Serahiel, and his grandmother Beatrice, along with Zenobia, a magic circle appeared in the center of the table, and a hologram of a familiar figure emerged. Azazel announced that they had been invited to a meeting with the northern faction. Issei's eyes widened as Azazel continued, explaining that Surzex had intended to tell him, but he had insisted on delivering the news himself. Issei sighed, and Azazel encouraged him, saying he would meet the old man from the north. A paper with an address appeared from the magic circle, and Azazel added a warning not to bring his wife or daughter. Issei's demeanor turned serious when Azazel mentioned that Shimazai wanted to see them: Barakiel, Elizabeth, Akeno, and Zenobia. A mark appeared on Zenovia's forehead as she felt a twitch in her left eyebrow. Once the circle faded, they finished dinner, and Serahiel and his wife returned home while the rest went to see Shimazai at the intensive care hospital in Grigori. When they finally arrived, no one expected what they would see. Himejima Shuri was sitting on her bed with a tranquil expression, gazing out the window. Issei felt as if his soul was escaping him. He staggered, prompting his wife to hold his arm while their daughter supported him from the other side, hugging him around the waist. Akeno felt tears welling in her eyes, and her legs weakened. Barakiel was in shock. There sat the woman who had pierced his hardened heart, the one with whom he had two wonderful children. Shuri turned her head, her eyes moistening. She could recognize her family even if they had grown. First, she saw her husband, who was silently crying. Then she noticed her little girl, now tall and beautiful, reflecting her own image. Lastly, she saw the tall man with dark blue hair, pale skin, and violet eyes, staring at her in shock while being supported by a young girl with blue hair and a white streak, along with a woman with white hair and red eyes. It was obvious, just seeing him confirmed it. Her little baby was now a man, and it seemed he had a family of his own. She assumed the woman was his wife or girlfriend, and the young girl was coincidentally her granddaughter. She remarked on how much they had grown before breaking into gentle tears. After they composed themselves and embraced as a family, Issei, with a smile that had only been seen by his wife and daughter, introduced the two women. He told Shuri that he wanted her to meet some people, and the two approached shyly. He introduced Elizabeth as his wife and Shuri as his mother. The white-haired woman gave a slight bow before sharing a small hug. He then introduced his daughter, Himejima Zenobia, and Shuri embraced her tightly, surprising her. Shuri expressed her gratitude, acknowledging that knowing her son must have weighed heavily on him, and she thanked them for helping him let go of that burden. She held a hand of each, while Issei looked away, slightly embarrassed. Shimazai stood in the doorway, noting that they seemed to have reunited. He informed Shuri that she was ready to return home that night and that a group of doctors would assist with her transfer. Shuri was confused by his formal address, but he explained that he could not address the mother of their governor any other way. Tears of pride filled Shuri's eyes as she expressed how proud she was of her son. Everyone smiled, and soon after, the group of doctors arrived to help Shuri get to her home, where a room had been prepared by Issei and Akeno's wife. Issei, his father, and Zenobia sat in the garden, enjoying tea peacefully. As Zenobia watched Issei smile fully, she felt that their family was now complete, which meant an even happier atmosphere. She could only thank the heavens for giving her such a wonderful and large family. Chapter End. Zenobia, standing to the right of her father, sighed wearily, finding the situation dull. They had been in demon territory for 2 days, during which her father was engaged in discussions with the representative of the Nordic faction, but nothing had been finalized. It was tiring even for him, as both shared a preference for more exciting matters. However, she admired her father's sense of responsibility. Issei, with his imposing aura, seemed to keep the high-class demons around them at bay, some curious and others slightly annoyed. Surzex approached them with his usual smile, which faltered upon noticing the bored demeanor of the pair. He apologized for the delay, explaining that Odin had encountered transportation issues with someone from his faction. He reassured them that the Hakuryuku, along with his sister and Barakiel, would arrive soon. Just then, Barakiel entered, followed by the Grigori entourage, and behind them were an elderly man and a young lady. Odin greeted the elder with a nod, who acknowledged him with a slight smile. The elder then turned his gaze to Issei, who met his eyes with a cold stare. Odin introduced himself as the All-Father and introduced his escort, Roswis, the Valkyrie. Roswis playfully protested about her non-existent boyfriend being mentioned, drawing amused reactions from those present. Issei introduced himself as the current governor of Grigori and introduced his daughter, Zenobia, who bowed respectfully. The elder inspected Zenobia, but upon seeing her shining silver armor covering her completely, his expression turned bored and disappointed. He seemed impatient, urging them to see what they had to offer. Issei felt pleased with how the meeting was progressing, despite Odin's tendency to ramble. Ultimately, an agreement was reached between the biblical and Nordic factions, resulting in a trade treaty and a pact of non-aggression. Odin expressed interest in the red dragon, prompting Issei to raise an eyebrow. He sighed and revealed the boosted gear, and suddenly, the voice of the Welsh dragon resonated in the room. Drake inquired about Odin's interest in his partner, noting that he was not easily swayed by mundane temptations like lust or wealth. Odin explained that he had heard rumors about Ophis, the infinite dragon goddess, being interested in the current celestial dragons. He speculated about her motives, suggesting she might be trying to sway them to the dark side. Issei remained serious, but it was Drake who responded with confidence, declaring that his partner could not be corrupted. He emphasized that even if challenged to a duel, Issei would never abandon his allies for power. Issei smiled confidently, while Zenobia felt a small cloud of annoyance at being referred to as the girl by the Welsh dragon. Odin appeared calm but was internally surprised by Drake's declaration, realizing that Issei might be on the path of the gods. A ghost of a smile crossed his wrinkled face. After their meeting, Surzex separated from the group to begin the gathering of young demons, where the heirs of the pillars would be introduced to the nobles of the underworld. Issei and Odin were invited purely out of courtesy. Odin asked Issei if he thought there would be any interesting individuals present, to which Issei nodded. He mentioned that Serog Baal, the head of the Baal house, was considered the strongest young demon. He also noted that the holder of the fragment of the Dragon King, Vitra, had potential as well. Odin focused his attention on the young demons, particularly the young ladies. After numerous words of encouragement from the current Lucifer, the introductions of the young demons began. Serog Baal confidently declared himself the leader of Baal, vowing to become a Mao. His confidence was remarkable, drawing attention from the nobles who murmured among themselves. When there were no more options, the crowd turned their attention to a red-haired girl. She introduced herself as Rias Grigori, the next heir of the Grigori house, expressing her dream of becoming the empress of the raiding games and surpassing Belial. The noble demons growled in approval. Finally, another young lady introduced herself as Sona Citri. As it is apparent, she was the heir of the Citri house, and her dream was to establish a school for raiding games. An elder interjected, reminding everyone that such a school already existed in the underworld. She acknowledged this fact, addressing the honorable elders, stating that while there was indeed an academy for raiding games, it catered only to the high-ranking nobles. Her academy would focus primarily on educating low and middle-class demons, including newly reincarnated vassals. The elder laughed heartily, expressing amusement at her youthful ambition. He was glad she had shared her dream at that moment, imagining how it would have been received had she voiced it during her debut. Another elder cautioned her, suggesting that while her idea might strengthen the allied ranks, the noble pureblood families would likely oppose such a proposal. He warned that traditions and family honor could be at risk if everyone gained the same experiences and knowledge. The young man with blue hair observed how the Citri pawn was on the verge of bursting with anger. When their gazes met, he signaled for calm. The blonde pawn reluctantly held his tongue until Serafal intervened. To summarize the disastrous and embarrassing interruption, Serafal proposed a raiding game between Rias and Sona. If Sona performed well, the elders and nobles would remain silent and would not obstruct Sona's dreams. Issei commented on the situation, noting its interesting nature, while keeping his cold gaze fixed on Saji. Odin, with a fresh smile on his face, acknowledged Issei's observation and asked if he would help. Issei had an idea to aid Sona. Azazel had mentioned that the other parts of Vitro were located in Grigori. He considered giving them to her after a slight adjustment, noting that their flames, though different, were quite similar. This thought brought a faint smile to his face, eliciting hearty laughter from the father of all. They agreed to support the Citri nobility. Issei stood alongside Odin as they still had business to discuss. Serzex then stopped Issei, also halting Odin. He inquired about Issei's interest in any of the noble families, knowing well the intentions of Lucifer and that he would not be pleased. Issei admitted that the pawns of the Citri and Baal houses were somewhat intriguing, while the others seemed ordinary or merely mediocre. Serzex narrowed his eyes slightly at Issei, having just been indirectly rejected. Chapter End. Azazel commented on the situation presented before the Grigori group, noting their dilemma. Rias, visibly frustrated, expressed her concerns about not having her queen and the absence of Himejima. The tension in the air was palpable as she struggled to contain her anger. Azazel reassured Rias, mentioning that Issei had said Akeno would be able to participate in the raiding game against Sona Citri and in the subsequent rounds. He encouraged her not to worry, emphasizing that Akeno had grown stronger. He suggested that Rias should be more concerned about Valley. With a resigned sigh, Rias turned her attention back to Azazel. She shared that she had asked her brother to arrange a meeting with the former Dragon King, Meteor Blaze Tannen, as she felt she could not assist in making Vala stronger. Azazel nodded in agreement, satisfied with her initiative. He then pointed out that Kaniko's Nikomidicide could be a valuable asset in their strategy against Sona Citri. Rias contemplated this but acknowledged that convincing Kaniko would be quite challenging. Azazel advised letting Kaniko decide for herself, warning that a power rejected could be dangerous, feeding on dark feelings and corrupting the user. Rias had an idea but quickly dismissed it. Azazel continued, discussing the bearer of Semikan, noting his speed and technique, but also his need for improvement in strength. Rias confirmed that she had already contacted her brother's Peace, who had agreed to help. Regarding Asia, Azazel planned to implement a magical training regimen, focusing on long-distance healing and basic defensive spells if time allowed. Finally, Azazel turned to Rias, acknowledging her skills as being of high merit but criticized her strategy as lacking. He suggested that she would need to train in that area, as Sona Citri had the upper hand. He mentioned that her mother would likely be more than willing to assist her with this. After much reflection, Rias nodded in agreement. With that, they called the remaining members of the occult club. As they prepared to leave, some members were more anxious than others. Azazel stopped Gasper by placing a hand on his shoulder, instructing him to wait. Gasper stammered in protest, but Azazel silenced him with a gesture. She pointed out that his fear significantly limited his power and set a goal for him to overcome his fear of blood. If he could achieve that quickly, they might also address his aversion to garlic. The thought filled Gasper with dread, as blood and garlic were his greatest fears, and he would have to confront them. Overwhelmed by nerves, Gasper fainted at Azazel's feet. She resisted the urge to roll her eyes, lifted him by the waist, and slung him over her shoulder like a sack of potatoes. Without another word, Azazel opened her wings and flew off to an unknown destination. Meanwhile, as the Gregori team prepared for the raiding game, Issei and his family decided that if Akeno was going to participate, she needed a break from her intense training. Issei felt satisfied, having witnessed Akeno manage to scorch one of her eyebrows without injuring herself. Elizabeth, addressing her brother and Akeno, shared memories of Issei before his marriage. She described him as an antisocial child, obsessed with training, who blamed himself for his misfortunes. Even without knowing him well, it broke her heart to see him that way. Over time, Issei had opened up to her, allowing her to ease some of his pain and guilt. She recalled how he had been a formidable fighter, respected and feared by those in Grigori, which was why Azazel had chosen him for his position. This intrigued Akeno, who questioned the extent of Issei's power. Elizabeth's expression turned serious, deepening Akeno's confusion. She explained that whispers in Grigori spoke of Issei's power level, suggesting it was even greater than Azazel's. However, no one, aside from Azazel, knew his true limits. Elizabeth recalled a mission where she had asked Issei to unleash his full power, but he had refused, warning her that doing so would be catastrophic. The memory lingered in her mind, leaving her with unanswered questions. Akeno pondered the advice she had received about asking the old crow Azazel, who was the only one that knew how to compare her brother to anyone else. With a thoughtful expression, she bit her tongue and made her way to her brother's office at home. Standing in front of the door, she knocked. When her brother's voice came through the dark wood, she nervously bit the inside of her cheek. She asked if she could spend some time with Rias before the raiding game began, her head lowering in anticipation of a refusal. Issei considered her request. He knew she had grown stronger and could now withstand 2% of his power. Though it pained him, he made his decision. He agreed to let Akeno go with Rias, reminding her to be careful. Akeno's head shot up, her eyes wide with disbelief. She smiled brightly and rushed to embrace her brother, even with the desk in the way, before darting off to her room. Issei then turned to his right, where Zenobia was reading several books. Their titles included Laws of Grigori Volume 2, Rites of the Winged Volume 5, Sacred Element for Dummies, and Fire Magic and its Counterparts. The first book contained all the laws governing Grigori, including those that had not been implemented or had been replaced, explaining their purpose. The second book, though somewhat ridiculous, outlined the rights of beings who were taken down in foreign territories and how to protect oneself while flying. The third book provided a basic understanding of how to manipulate the sacred element that the blood of the fallen allowed. This was typically taught to young children in Grigori schools, but now that he was older, he needed to catch up on his studies and improve his control over the element. Lastly, with his impending reincarnation through ancient rituals, there was a possibility he had inherited the holy lightning from his grandfather or the flames from his father. His father, being proud, believed he would awaken his sacred flame, which led him to study fire magic. Zenobia agreed, nodding vigorously, but reminded him that they needed to train his flames. Draeg's voice echoed from the green sphere on the back of Issei's left hand, teasing him about the challenges ahead. Issei sighed, reminiscing about how much easier things had been when he was younger. Draeg reminded him not to complain, pointing out that he could have ended up worse, referencing the bearer of Albion, who was likely struggling in the dividing. Issei acknowledged that he needed to grow stronger. Although Akeno had become much stronger, her growth rate was not as significant as Valley Lucifer's. He believed that if she trained properly, she would become a powerful man one day. Drake playfully reminded Issei of his own growth rate, calling him a prodigy born once every 100 years, whose power had far surpassed Azazel's. Issei hesitated, downplaying his strength, but Drake insisted that when he unleashed his full power, it was enough to incinerate a large portion of Europe, even while maintaining a barrier strong enough to make it seem like Hades was in battle. With a resigned sigh, Issei stood up to take Zenobia wherever she wanted to go. After all, she was still his little girl. "I'm so sorry, everyone. I know I haven't updated in a long time, but my teachers don't understand the word moderation, and honestly, I'm overwhelmed. That was all. I'm really struggling, everyone. Mishiro-kun.